Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hi, it's Ivy Slater with today's episode of Her Success Story. My guest today is Hilary DeCesare. Hilary's career has been vast and wild, and it's amazing as we've gotten to know each other how many parallels are in our lives. She started her career at Xerox. Following Xerox, she spent 10 years at the Oracle Corporation, garnering more than 100 worldwide managerial and sales awards, including prestigious Global Top Account Manager Award. She currently sits on the board of Cal Poly Foundation, San Luis Obispo, and Max Cure Foundation. Basically, Hilary is a mover and shaker. Today, she is a business launch and relaunch coach, the CEO of the ReLaunch Company, host of the Silver Lined ReLaunch podcast. She's a seasoned speaker in Silicon Valley and many, many women's conferences nationwide. Hilary, thank you so much for taking time out of a busy schedule to join me here today at Her Success Story.
Well, thank you so much. I love being with you.
So you've had an interesting career. You really sat in a male-dominated world. That's part of our conversations for many, many years. You went on to build businesses within other companies numerous times successfully. And then you said, it's my turn. Share a little bit about that.
As you're sitting there, it's funny because, we go through times, right, where we are in these very male dominated worlds. You get to be in the mid zone, as I'm calling it, and I'm saying I'm 52 years old. I'm in the mid zone. And early in the career, when I spent the 10 years at Oracle, it was very male dominated. And then going into the Silicon Valley and being an entrepreneur and launching several companies there continued to be. But throughout that process, I learned so much about life, so much about business. And now it finally does seem like I'm kind of the patchwork quilt of everything that I've done to date has come together to create the ability to be the CEO of a company called the ReLaunch Co.
And so share a little bit about what your company is today and why this has evolved as the utmost level of importance. Because, listeners, Hilary and I have really off the cuff conversations. Is we do what we do because we choose to do it, but not because we have to do it. So I'm asking this from a woman to woman's perspective of why you committed to doing this and why now.
So I think that there's always been this illusion of what it would be like to be an entrepreneur, how to be a successful entrepreneur, and the steps to take. And the reason I say it's an illusion is because for me and for so many women that have gotten to where they are today, like you and myself, is that we had to forge our own way. And this illusion that it's been this, easy ride and everything has been, great. Now we're super successful. And, look at us, we're here. It's been a bumpy, tumultuous, you name it. There's been, so many different relaunches that the reason that I'm now at the place where it doesn't feel like work when I get up in the morning is that I am able to watch women build a foundation that I only wish I had, a foundation of being able to understand business, understand that you don't have to have an MBA, understand that the real business happens daily and the decisions you make are the reason that you will be in business tomorrow. And I believe that if I can be a little bit of a part of somebody's journey to success so that they don't have to take every single bad turn I did, then it's all worth something. And so I did go ahead. I created the ReLaunch Co. in order to get people fired up again about creating the ultimate business that they want, not the business that they think they should have, but the one that is based around their heart, their feeling in their heart, to the head, and not just the logical side, but like, how do you actually really get out of your head into your heart so that you can tap into the universal laws that are trying so desperately to work with you, but that we tune out because we think like, no, that won't work. The law of attraction won't work for me. No, the law of reciprocity, I've never seen that work. The law of like, of the give, of detachment. I don't even know what that is. So how do I make it work? I want people to realize that the heart to the head to the higher self is the ticket to success. I now know it. My hundreds of clients that work with me directly know it. And now it's time for me to get that message out to the broader scale so that more women can be successful.
So I'm curious, because you and I can talk mindset. We can go down those journeys of, and we were, listeners. This is not just for you. Hilary and I were chatting about what we've created in our lives and what we're creating next before we even jumped on to record. That this is an actually extension of our conversation. When you look at the mindset piece, the ideas of the laws of the universe, how did you, as a businesswoman out of Silicon Valley, where did you connect to the universal laws, the universal truths?
So I think that I got run over by a Mack truck in terms of trying to communicate. I was not listening to my internal voice. I was not listening and tapping into my intuition. I certainly was not thinking about like positive thoughts and affirmations and, limiting beliefs. I wasn't thinking at all about that. And I think where it really came crashing down was I didn't trust my intuition on a very, very big decision to take money in my last 2 companies ago, where I was being given an opportunity to raise about $2 million. And I had this first inclination, like, don't take it from this person. You do not. In fact, I had such a big hit. It was like, run the hell out of, I remember it. I feel like I should have a TED talk. The martini, the man in the Manhattan lobby. And I didn't listen to my inner voice. And what it was saying was screaming, get the hell out of this lobby. Who is this guy drinking at, midday, this martini, and run. And I didn't. And it all came to pass that years later, I'm in the boardroom and he is sitting right there, and the company is going through the worst, situation. And he's wanting to, get into this whole thing around, get out, I'll take over. And it literally crashed the company down. And within about a month, I get called from by the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission. And they said, we're now investigating this guy for illegal actions, Ponzi scheme, all these different things. And we need your laptop. And I said, and at that point it's like, or hard drive. They said, we need your hard drive. And I said, you know what? Take it. There's nothing on there that I don't, want to put out there. And he ended up in federal prison for 3 years. And so if I had really leaned in before, and it's always the if I should have, could have, would have, but here's what it did for me. After that, I started to think, why didn't I listen to myself? Why didn't I listen to what I already knew down deep inside? And so I got very involved in learning about not only neuroscience, I was a psych major in college, but I started to actually study how you can utilize the universal truths and utilize neuroscience and, really lean into all of this to have success. And when I started to put it all together, it was like, okay, I did it when I was at Oracle, when I had all this great success. Then I got, off track. And then all of a sudden I got back on track and I started to realize, what's the correlation? Oh my God, it's this. It's the 3 H's. This is what everyone needs to know.
Share the 3 H's. You can't leave us hanging there.
I know, but it's the heart.
Yeah.
It's that heart, that feeling, the emotions tied to everything you're doing, and having that true connection to the head, and not just the logical side, but those limiting beliefs. And I call them bugs, beliefs underground surfacing. Beliefs underground surfacing. And we have belief blasters to get those and blow those up, because you can't think your way out of them. You can't, no matter what.
No, you cannot.
And
you
then
cannot.
And then the higher self is all of these universal principles. And so you start to think about, the significant part of this, and it really is the bugs. It's how can you, it's one of those situations, when you leave a little teeny crumb on your kitchen counter, and that one little ant shows up, and you're like, oh, that ant. And you really just, you go to sleep, and the next morning there's ants everywhere.
Mound. You have a mound.
Black strips across the, countertop. And you're like, that's what your limiting beliefs do to you. They creep up at the most inopportune times.
It happens to be so true. I'll always say, and I love how you put the perspective in, it starts in your heart, because, years ago when I was brought to task by my accountant, when I said I was looking to explore leaving printing, right? The printing industry. And I had a very successful company. And, he's literally stood up at a conference table and berated me that I didn't know what I was doing, that how could I think whatever. But my head and my heart, right? My head saw the practical, but it no longer, my heart couldn't do it anymore, right? I needed that alignment. And we all do. And the key to success is, you're right, is when we are aligned. When we do flourish is when we wake up and we're one. And we work through the limiting beliefs. Early on in building Slater's success, I said, but $30,000 was an easy sell in printing. How do you make a living, right? This coaching consultant, right? How do you do it? How do you transform it? What does that look like? How do you believe that I become the product, which you don't? It's the result. But it's an interesting concept of as we transform. And it goes from touching into your heart, moving it up to your head, and then powering through anything and everything that will hold you back. And there are naysayers out there that will feed you and feed into that. So how have, in ReLaunch and everything you've done today, what have been some of the things that have surprised you?
I think that when you only look at face value, there's so much. Humans are so complex. And when you only take that face value and you think like, this is the reason they're doing it to me, you have to take a step back and say, there's a bigger picture here. There's a bigger message. There's a bigger, you talk about my podcast, the silver lined relaunch. There's a silver lining here that maybe I'm supposed to garner. Maybe I'm supposed to really understand. But you have to be willing to understand people and to understand their personalities, and to not believe that just because they're not acting the way you want them to act, because that's how you would act in the situation, it's okay. It's okay to be different. And that's something that took me a long time to learn, that the differences that we all bring to a situation only give you that much better perspective of it.
Any examples you could share?
Yeah. I mean, now that I've got this guy in my head, this board member that went crazy. I think that even, I've been asked this because of the Silver Line podcast. I'm like, is it possible that there was a huge teaching moment in that for me? And the silver lining that came from, I looked at it very much that it was emotionally abusive to me. And like you said, the person who sat across from you, I had that all the time. This guy was just beating me down. And yet, as he beat me down, I developed that strength that I have today because of it. because of almost 7 years of, probably 5 total, but 5 years of having to work with him and having to, it's the bounce back. It's the comeback, like the comeback kid, right? So that would be probably my best example, is that face value, it looked like a really awful situation, but what was really underneath was he was giving me the chops to be able to do what I'm doing today, right?
Right.
I can literally coach through, I haven't hit a situation yet that I haven't been able to use what I've learned throughout my career with people because of these relaunches.
It's so true. And sometimes people say, well, how do you know this? I was like, oh, I don't know. I've been business owner for 25 years. While I was raising 2 kids. My dad passed away during it. This happened, that happened, financial trouble. There was all these things. And then we could just go to then in running a printing company, the things that went right or wrong on a day-to-day basis. How do you, right? The things we learn when we don't know we're learning them, I'll always say.
And most of the time, as you just said, the things that, we learn when we don't know, those are the most impactful. Like, so I look at, the Oracle days and, hundreds of awards and this and that. And yeah, it was hard, but those were incredible times, right? Rocket ship, just like, whoo, like just, everything that was happening. And because there was so much happening, the few little teeny things that maybe weren't perfect, we're like, who cares? Keep going. But this was, chop me at the knees. This was make me relearn how, what my whole thoughts around business really were. And that I really sit here and I say, to this day, such a blessing that I had to go through that, because as a businesswoman, I am, I listened to, Helen Reddy just passed away recently, and she had that song, I Am Woman.
I Am Woman.
And my mom used to play that all the time when I was growing up. And I'm like, yeah, I really, truly am invincible now from a business world. Now I'm still a woman. I still have the heart. I still have the emotions and everything, but my gosh, I mean, that's when I developed the chops of business and can now coach people in it because I have gone through it.
One last quick tip for the listeners today. If there was one thing as business leaders that we can do to move ourselves forward, what would that be?
Ooh, first and foremost, I would say, go back to what I said about bugs, beliefs, underground, surfacing. Stop putting your walls up. Coming from the queen of the wall maker and queen of jumping over those walls, scaling those walls, they will eventually get too high to be able to jump over. And so eventually you got to take them down. And so there has to be a process for eliminating your limiting beliefs. Willpower can only get you so far. And once you do that, it literally opens up. Once that wall is down, it opens up so many possibilities that you never even thought about.
Beautiful. How can our listeners know more and learn more about you?
So definitely, I would say head on over to the Facebook group, the ReLaunch Effect. The ReLaunch Effect. It is the best place. I do a bunch of free trainings in there. You also hear about, my podcast. I know that you're going to be a guest on my podcast soon, which I'm super excited about, but it really gives you a good idea. And it also shares when my next, I have a business program, a 6-month business program called The Fired Up Entrepreneur. Because yes, I want everyone to have that fired up experience again. So come on over to the ReLaunch Effect in Facebook.
Awesome. Hilary, thank you so much for joining me here today. I look forward to many, many fun things in our future together. And listeners, you definitely want to check out the Silver Lining podcast. First of all, the name in and of itself is driving me there. Because I'm a strong believer of finding the silver linings. And anytime there's an obstacle put in front of us, there is a silver lining there for you if you choose to find it. Hilary, thank you again for joining me. Listeners, Let's do this. Hit subscribe. We come into your inbox every Monday morning with fresh new content and interviews, as well as, this is the important piece today, take a moment, write down the piece that impacted you the most and what you're going to do about it. Leave those notes in the show notes to hold yourself accountable. And thank you for joining me here at Her Success Story.